throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
It happened just over 1 minute into flight.
1 minute, 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
From Mission Control, silence. Then the bland, chilling report.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
Slow motion.
And yeah,
a search effort couldn't begin for some 15 minutes after.
39 years ago today. So the year was 1986.
Right.
And Challenger exploded, killing Flight Commander Dick Scobie, pilot Michael Smith, Ronald McNair, Elliot Ozanuka, Judith Resnick, Gregory Jarvis, and, of course, school teacher Krista McAuliffe.
Perhaps one of the most famous of the whole crew, although they were all important. And I was sitting in a classroom teaching, and we were watching it on TV. In those days, you still watched it when they took off. It was a big deal. And, of course, you talk about having to explain that then to kids and talk about that and just the horror of that in the moment, because we all watched it. We didn't really know what was happening. And then when it became apparent as to what we were seeing in front of our eyes, we kept thinking, these things can't happen to us. We're indestructible. And about every time we do it in history, we think we're indestructible. From the Titanic to 9/11 to this to so many other things that have happened over the years, we find out that we're not indestructible, that we're not immortal. This was, and I remember President Reagan speaking about touching the face of God, which was one of the better speeches when we wanted to be comforted by our president at that time. Yeah, it was. It was.
Now, what's interesting, too, is that when you were talking about we think we're untouchable, within the last week, I want to say if it wasn't yesterday, it was Friday, I believe, was the anniversary of an event in 1967, and I believe it was Apollo 7, which ignited and killed 3.
That was Gus Grissom and that crew, right? Yeah.
So, I remember that when I was a child.
Yes.
And nothing really, thankfully, Apollo 13, they were able to avoid a potential disaster. I've read some things where they were less than a minute away from losing everything inside that little cabin that they had managed to use because there were failures due to a little explosion.
And you talk about a story of ingenuity and figuring it out with stuff.
Yes. But, if you remember the investigation into the Challenger disaster, what it basically all came down to.
O-rings? Is that what it was?
O-rings. So it's a a rubber type compound ring in between different sections.
Looks like the stopper you put in the bottom of your sink.
Yeah, yes. Well, it looked or like what do they call them? A washer.
Yeah.
Like a washer that you would use to bridge the gap between metal parts. And apparently, when at a particular temperature, even though this was Florida, it got cold. And, it wasn't as compliant because it had been so cold. And it needed to be compliant in order to do its job. And that's what led to the explosion. So it's always, they were pushing to do the launch. There's we need to go up. We need to go up.
And it was too cold. And
yes. So, pushing that envelope requires, some courage, but in this particular case, tragedy.
There are these kind of things that happen along the way.
Yeah.
Well, it is 8:39 here on WOYK, 34 degrees here and it's cold. We're here this morning, but not as cold as it's been here on Brooks Robinson Plaza. But I wanted to go to the question I asked this morning at Gary Sutton Show on Facebook. And if you go there and check it out, the question goes like this. We, the people, are the first 3 words of our Constitution, the supreme law of our land. Many people think that we have lost control of the we and turned the power over to them, our representatives. That was not what we were supposed to be doing. Now, the question, How do we get the people get our power back in your opinion? And I got a couple of opinions this morning from people. Jeff Whitman said, we've taken step one already by removing the heavy-handed, oppressive, progressive party of the enlightened intelligentsia, whose mission was to rule every facet of our lives in the knowledge that we were totally incapable of making our own decisions about our own lives. Those condescending power brokers can trace their origins to Barack Hussein Obama, the architect of fundamentally changing America. That was his opinion. Carl Castell said, I do believe that we have lost control of our country. I think that we need to impose term limits on our representatives. You hear this argument a lot, and we're going to address this in my little talk here. We do this with the president. Why not with the Senate and the House? That way we don't have people who spend their whole life in public service, and limit the amounts that corporations can donate to representatives. Think about it. Why would you spend millions of dollars for a job that pays around $174,000 a year plus benefits? And then Deb said, what I see today is that we are so divided that it's hard to take the power back, that everyone wants to have things their way, if that makes any sense. It does. I understand it. And so I thought about this a lot. I was talking to someone about this very topic over the weekend, which is kind of how this question got spawned. And I said, we have term limits. We do have a way of getting back our power. We have term limits. We may have seen the beginning of it in this election. I'm not sure. It might be too early to tell. Where people started to vote the reality instead of the party. How is the country doing? Is inflation too high? Is the price of groceries too high? What can we do about that? What is being done about that? What is the problem? Why are we there? And a lot of people, I think, started to ask that question who before maybe went to their side, as Deb suggested here in her answer, where we're too divided because people just look at their side and run over the cliff like lemmings with that side, be it right, left, whatever it might be. Again, I'm not approaching this from Trump or Biden or anything like that. I'm approaching it from the standpoint of what we need to do. What's our responsibility as citizens of this great country? And I think one of the responsibilities that we have is, number one, stop the groupthink. Now, that's going to be harder to do, and it's going to take a long period of time, I think, to do it, but we need to stop it. The groupthink has led us into division, okay, because we feel comfortable when it's the we's and the they's, okay? We feel pretty comfortable when we're surrounded by people who think the same way. I like the idea of getting back to people who think differently and yet at the same time can respect each other. That's one of the things that I believe in. It's idealistic, I grant you. Okay, but by the same token, I also think that it is one of the few ways that we're going to have to really get started back with this journey to have a unified country. Now, does a unified country mean that we all agree? No, and I hope it never does. I hope it means that we always disagree. But with the idea that we disagree because we want this diversified place to be a much better place in the long run for all of us to live in. And I hope we can disagree in the sense that we can come back and talk again tomorrow over the very thing we disagreed on today and maybe make the conversation even better and even a higher level and maybe even find some things we hadn't thought about yesterday because we took some time to think about what someone else said. So I think, number one, stop the group thing. Number two, let's start to do something here. And maybe you've heard this before, maybe you haven't. This is something I thought about on my own. Start to be unpredictable. One of the things I hate about the conversations that we have in our country about politics right now is we're way too predictable. I watch these shows on TV, and these people come on and they spout the party line and the party memo, and they just do it. And to me, it is so tedious and boring. That's the way I think we become as voters in this country to some degree. We're predictable. We follow along. Again, part of that's groupthink, but part of it too is we don't have the time to really look up all the things that we need to look up, to find out all the things we need to find to prove a particular story or to find out if it's true, to learn a little bit more about a candidate and what they've done and where they've been so that we have some credentials before they get the job. So what we do is we go with the group. I say get rid of that. And then we become predictable in the way we vote. Think about the insult that we have every single year that we have a big election. We have people who are drawing districts around homes because they know they can they will vote for a conservative or a liberal consistently. Is that the way we really want things? That we're that predictable that people can tell what we're going to do and we're going to vote for them no matter what? Is that really what we want to do? Or do we want to be unpredictable as citizens and say, okay, we the people have the power. And how do we have the power? By being unpredictable. And let me explain what I mean by that. When we say, here is what the policies are of this Republican administration, this Democratic administration, they're practicing. My kitchen table says that it's not being done quite right. The fact that I can't buy this year what I bought last year says that something's not happening right. The fact that I feel like I'm more regulated or more taxed or, whatever it might be is not right. And so I am going to vote based on those things that are affecting me as a human being. In other words, I'm not a predictable vote for you every year. You can't count on me all the time. I don't vote in a block. I vote as a person who is figuring this out from my own experiences, from what I'm reading, and from what I'm learning. Okay, there is a beauty, I think, in what the American people actually know, and there's a beauty in the truth that they bring to the table. A lot of people who don't trust the American people, who think they should be sitting on the sidelines, who look around and say, they're getting it wrong. I don't think so. I think there is a basic understanding of what's going on by the American people. So let's become unpredictable in how they can count on us or not count on us. They don't get an automatic vote for the next 4 years and say, well, I didn't do anything this year, but give me 4 more years and I won't do anything then either. They don't get that vote anymore. So be unpredictable. And finally, to the point that Carl made about term limits. We've got term limits. If we get rid of the groupthink, if we get back to being unpredictable, if we get back to measuring things based on real life here, then we have the term limits. It's called the vote. And we can win with a vote, and they can't sit there at nighttime and predict all the ways we're going to vote and predict until they get to 100% about how things are going to turn out. Because you know what? At the end of the day, we, the people, will determine who is going to be elected, not them just counting on us for a predictable groupthink kind of turn-in every year that's always the same. Just my thoughts this morning. It's 8:46.